You there guys, this is Dale of Learn One About Airsoft, and today we're taking a look at Project X, the CQB site in the city of Leicester. Now I should point out that this was the first time I'd been to the site. I had no previous experience of it. I went in as a new person to the place, and this is entirely based on my experiences of that day and that day only. Also, this game day took place in 2020, so there are some COVID measures in place that may or may not be relevant in the future and just change the gameplay. Please don't be relevant in the future, but anyway, so be sure to keep that in mind as we go on with the video review. So the site is located on Gwendolyn Road, which is on the eastern side of the city limits of Leicester. The postcode is found in the description but down below if you're going there yourself, and it dropped me off literally just around the corner from the site, so I did have to make a couple of turnings based on my own guesswork in order to get there, but it wasn't too hard to actually find. They did have a sign out front, but it wasn't actually on the road. It was like right next to the main entrance to the building, so I kind of got lucky as I was looking around and spotted the sign. So potentially maybe one nearer the road if they can. It seems to be worked on like an industrial site with a couple of other buildings there that are owned by other people, so maybe they're not allowed to. But I would recommend you familiarise yourself with what the entrance looks like before you set off. So just get on Google Maps and have a quick look before you get going, just so you know exactly where you're supposed to be at. There is a car park on the site. It is literally right next to the entrance of there, so you can just slide straight in. It is backing onto a open to the public road. However, this is in a city, so I'd strongly recommend that you keep all your gear in bags and boxes and just not open carry into the site, because obviously we don't want to be spooking members of the public. I'd also recommend as well that you pack light. Only bring the kit that you absolutely need with you and try to reduce the weight, because even though the car park is right next to the site entrance, the site safe zone is on completely the opposite side of the building and up a couple of flights of stairs. So whatever you bring with you, you're going to have to drag it up to the top of that building. So just bear that in mind. So the walk-on fee for the site then was £30. If you're wanting to get a higher kit, then it becomes £40, and that's included with a face mask, a riff, and 1,000 rounds of ammo. They did mention to me that they also do options for hiring out pistols, shotguns, and tracer units. So if you want to mix it up a little bit and get proper into the CQB field, that option is there. I should point out as well that lunch is not included as part of that walk-on fee. What they had on site was basically a takeout menu that they just ordered from at lunch and get that shipped in for you. But at the time of recording, they didn't actually have any card payments at the site, so that could be something that could potentially catch people out. So please be aware, lunch is not included, and if you not have any cash on you, you might be a bit out of luck there. As for facilities on the site, they did have a small shop selling snacks, ammo, like the occasional riff or two, just basic stuff that are able to keep you going throughout the day. They did have actual bathrooms on site, like they were fully functioning, which is brilliant to see. They also, I think, had some capacity for battery charging that I saw. So if your battery dies halfway through the day, they could potentially charge that back up for you, which is excellent to see. They did have the chrono test at the start of the day. FPS limit is 350 on a 0.2 gram BB. They did have their own bag of 0.2s next to the chrono, but from what I could tell, it wasn't mandatory that you use them. And also, they weren't actually giving out any tags at the chrono just to say that yes, this gun has passed it. So potentially a room for improvement, just getting like some little coloured zip ties for that. One thing that was very good and surprising to see though is they did actually spring a surprise chrono test on us halfway through the day. We just finished one of the games and said, right, everybody's just coming in for a quick chrono just to make sure you're all playing fair, which was a great bit of proactivity from them that I don't think I've ever really seen that at other sites, so that took me a bit aback, but I was very impressed by it. One other thing that they have on the site, which is exceptionally cool, is they had their own target range in the safe zone. So instead of just a shooting range where you can test your guns, they had a series of interactive targets where they'd time you. If you wanted to post an official time, they had like the higher gun that everybody was using that you had to run it through. But if you asked, like, they would let you just run your own kit if you just wanted to have some fun with that, which was just a good distraction really, and kept people engaged. Like when you're waiting for the next game to start and you've got a couple minutes to kill, yeah, that was a very fun and interesting thing to see in the safe zone. So what were the staff like on the day then? Well, considering there was only 2 of them, they actually did a pretty decent job for what I could see. Bear in mind they were operating at massively reduced player numbers. I'm pretty certain that once the player numbers pick back up, they will bring the more staff in. But yeah, during the firefights, they were always positioned to see what was going off with both the teams. They were always able to correctly call when a player lobs a grenade, how many people it had taken out, and they were always just keeping a good eye on players, make sure everyone was playing fairly, so they did an excellent job during the games themselves. As for the players themselves, there was a bit of in terms of hit taking during the day, like no more so than you'd find at any other place, but one thing to bear in mind with this is that you are fighting in some areas with dim lights, and when you are absolutely sprinting towards a bit of cover and firing at the same time, it is very difficult to see exactly where your shots are going. So overall, I'd say that the quality of play between players was actually really quite good. There was a lot of good complimenting going, like people on other teams like saying, yeah, great shot when you got taken out, and just general banter between them. So there was a really good atmosphere between the players on site as well. Now, I hope this bit won't be relevant in a year or two, but there were good COVID measures in place there on the day. They were taking everyone's temperature before they allowed them into the building, and they had to sanitise their hands then and there before they were allowed in. There was hand sanitizer available in the safe zone. I think they could have just tightened up the measures in terms of making sure people were wearing masks in the safe zone, but everything else of that was actually really quite good prevention measures, which is certainly more than I've seen with some other sites during the pandemic. So hopefully they keep that up as long as this carries on. Okay, so what about the game zone then, the actual site layout? Well, if anyone's ever played in a ex-factory building or disused warehouse, they probably know what to expect with this. I've always maintained that a CQB site lives or dies based on how well it handles its choke points. The prime example of a bad choke point would be staircases. Project X got around this by not having any staircases in play at all. All the gameplay on the day took place on one floor, and admittedly, it's a really big floor. It was mostly the what used to be the factory floor. I think they said it used to be a rubber factory, something like that. But anyway, so because it was a factory floor, it was really quite wide, so they had plenty of buildings and barricades in there. So it wasn't just like one route to funnel down. You had plenty of room to spread out as a team and approach from different angles. They also had an office space, which was mainly like rooms with like drywall and doorways to go through, so plenty of breaching action there. But that's on the back end of the site, so it's a rare occasion that was ever actually in use. There was one minor choke point on the side, which is where the office space meets the factory floor. But I say it's a minor choke point because instead of just having one big bottleneck, they actually had two paths of which you could go through it. So yes, gameplay did tend to focus around this area, but you could still get through it and you could get around the other team. And there were instances of one team or the other actually making a breakout and pushing into the other side without just drowning it in bodies or throwing as many grenades as they had on it. So there were ways to move around that, which was great to see. My one big takeaway from the cover they were using as well is that it's all plywood, tyre stacks, metal sheeting and these like inflatable bag things. And what struck me about those is a lot of that seems portable, which would mean to me then that if the site organisers wanted, they could quite easily move a lot of this stuff around, which would then lead the site having to quite a lot of replay value, which was really good. Because you don't want your indoor site to be a once and done affair, like you've been there for the day, great, you know the site. With this, I could see them moving that layout about and keeping things mixed up and fresh, which was excellent to see. Due to COVID, the player numbers on site was reduced from 120 players max to about 40, so about 20 aside on the day. And this was very comfortable for me playing. It meant that we were never actually fighting over which bit of cover our teammates were holding. Like you could spread out across the factory floor, you could get many different ways. And I think the site could quite comfortably hold 80 and have like a good gameplay experience with that. I'd question 120. Like I think when you start having 60 players aside and on the one floor to play on, you might get a bit claustrophobic with that. But for player numbers reducing that, yeah, this site is absolutely great to play through and I loved it. So what were the game modes themselves like? Well, we started the day off with a simple pushback game, and then the second game was a turnaround of that where we swapped sides. Attackers were on unlimited regen and they had to sweep through the factory floor as quick as they could, and including the offices at the back. Defenders were on hit and dead and they had 3 positions that they had to defend, and after the 2 games it was the time of whichever team sweeped it the fastest was the winner. I've seen this game type a lot over different sites over the years, and I still maintain that it's still quite a good one to do, especially at the start of the day. because it's enough to get people up and about and moving and getting into the feel of it, but also for new players it allows them to actually explore the site at a slower pace, so they'll tend to learn which bits of cover are useful and they don't just blow straight past it and not learn anything about the site. So it's really good for familiarising the teams with the site for the more complex games later on in the day, so a pretty good one to start it out with. The next game type was Intel Recovery. There were a load of DVD cases and 2 laptops spread about the entire floor. We had to collect as many as they could, bring them back to base, and the second game was a turnaround of that where the team swapped spawn points and played the same game, and whoever was the winner was the combined total of the however many objectives you got. So even though you could potentially argue that one side had the better starting position because they swapped it around later and it was the combined total, that didn't really become an advantage because both teams would benefit from that during certain games. Did quite like this one. Like some of the objectives were pretty well hidden as well, considering there were quite a few of them. Like the first game I didn't see any cases, like our team kept bringing them back and I was like, didn't find any. Saw quite a couple more when we turned it around though. But yeah, this is one of the games that focused around the mid choke point quite a bit that I was on about earlier. Did have some breakouts on either side to get a little bit into enemy territory, snatch a case and then leg it back to base with it. But overall, yeah, quite an enjoyable game type, this one. The next one was a bit of an interesting one. We actually had to return the DVD cases that we'd found, and there was like 2 boxes in the middle of the map. Now, they'd actually shrunk the game zone for this one, so instead of using the entire site and the mid choke point was the focus, they'd actually just brought it just to the factory side and put it in the middle there. So we weren't fighting over the same midpoint as last time, which was a great decision. Like that means that you get to use a lot more of the site, and it means that gameplay doesn't become boring because you're playing in literally the same area. So great foresight from the marshals there. And the flip side of this one, you had to bring your DVDs back to the box, but if their enemy had already put some in theirs, which is right next to your box, you can literally just lift them out and put them in yours. So the question posed by this game type was, do you rush in with all your cases, slam them in and just try and hold the area, or do you hang some back and wait for the other team to get theirs in, then take over the area and nick theirs? So very interesting back and forth with this one. And because it was in that smaller area, like no team had control over these boxes for any real length of time. Because yeah, sure, you might have just wiped the enemy team, but 20 seconds later, every single one of those is going to be back in the fight. So you'd never hold this central area for long. So great game type, that one. The next one we played, there were 2 mannequins hidden around the site. We're playing over the entirety again, but we had to bring them to a fixed point, which was different from the last 2. And we had to bring both of them to this building and hold the building for 5 minutes once they were both there. At the end of that, though, only one of the mannequins was actually in the building. Like, I'm assuming the other team found theirs, but never actually brought it in, because they were wanting to take over the building first and then bring the mannequin in, which was quite a good decision on their part, because we only had the one, even though we had the building at the end of it. But, yeah, good game type with that one as well, so very happy with how that played out. So, overall, like, a good bit of variety to these things. Like, I've never seen the one with actually putting objectives to the midpoint and then nicking them from the other teams. Like that was an interesting one, because usually when you steal objectives from the other team, you have to go to their base on the other side of the map. But having it in the middle meant that you didn't have people wandering off or just like getting lost in bits of the site. You knew where you needed to go. So yeah, I do think they really used the area available to them well as well, because we were never, even though there was a very obvious midpoint to the site, and if they just had the entire site open to play all throughout the day, all the engagements would have happened in that area. The fact they actually limited their site to certain bits meant that that was never the case. So great bit of foresight with them, and that really made the game types work, in my opinion. So overall then, do I think Project X is a site that people should be going to visit? Is it worth that visit? Now, I'm not a dedicated CQB player. Like, I much prefer the outdoors to the indoors because I tend to find that my game style revolves on me flanking the enemy team rather than just straight up fighting each other. Like, I much prefer to get around them and get the flank angle, and that's why I tend to prefer outdoors. However, I was actually able to experience that gameplay inside in this site, so I absolutely had a blast with this site, and I wouldn't have any problem recommending it to people. Like, the fact it was just so open and you had so much cover on offer, so you were never forced down a linear corridor. You could get around it multiple ways. So yeah, sure, they've got that building over there, but if you could just slide to this bit of cover here, you're going to get a good angle on the back of them, and there was a big ebb and flow to it. There was very little just fixed, like, I have to get here and the only way I can do it is by throwing 8 grenades down a hole. No, like, you were able to move about, you were able to flank, you were able to use cover effectively, work as a team, and that was brilliant. Loved it. Absolutely loved it. 1 or 2 minor improvements for the site. I think if you're charging £30 as your basic walk-on, then lunch should be included as a price. Even if it's for the takeout menu, just maybe say that like £2.50 or £3-4 as part of that walk-on is dedicated to their order, and just have players have that option. I also think as well for the chrono test that if you've got the 0.2 gram BBs there for people to use, make them use them for the test. And if you can get some little coloured zip ties just to stick on the gun once they've passed it, say, yes, this gun has passed that test, then that'd be great. But those are exceptionally minor points. So I really wouldn't have a problem recommending this site to people, even people that aren't that CQB focused. This isn't like hardcore breach and clear, turn a corner to suddenly have a shotgun barrel in your face form of CQB. Like, it's indoors certainly, but there's a lot of room for manoeuvring and just getting around the enemy team, and that just produces so much more interesting gameplay to me, and that's why I did really enjoy my day there. Now, I hope you've enjoyed this video review of Project X, the CQB site in Leicester. If you've got any questions you'd like to ask me, feedback you'd like to give, maybe you want to share your own experiences of the game days at the site, then leave it in the comment section down below and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. And until next time, this has been Dale of Lone Wombat Airsoft.